Welcome back. Next in our series of blacksmithing basics, we're making a round punch. For this you'll need a chunk of coil spring, the tongs that we made last episode, a means of cutting the spring, and a file. In addition to the usual suspects of a forge, a hammer and an anvil. First step, we're going to cut off a chunk of spring about 6 inches long. For anyone who chose a hacksaw for cutting, see you in 3 weeks. We pop the spring in the fire and let the coating burn off. This can produce some quite nasty fumes, so do this with good ventilation and the correct PPE. When the coating's burnt off, we need to straighten it out. I find this is easiest to do in essentially 2 halves. Straightening one side, then turning it around, holding that newly straightened side, and doing the other. Once we have our straight section of spring, we're going to start the taper. To do this, hold the piece at an angle in line with the far side of the anvil. With a tilted hammer, make blows straight down, aiming for the centre of your hammer face to hit the edge of the anvil. Let's see what that looks like for real. Make a few strikes, then turn 90 degrees and repeat, until the end starts to draw down. As you start to put a taper on the piece, you'll want to lower the angle of the workpiece so that the taper is always flat against the anvil. Any gap between the piece and the anvil will result in bends. Once we have a steep taper on the end of the piece, we'll start elongating the taper. To do this, lower the workpiece until the point the taper joins the main bar is in contact with the anvil, and start forging from here towards the tip. We will repeat this process until the taper is of the desired length. For beginners, it's fairly common to accidentally bend the taper while you're working. To move the tip back in line, place the tip on the anvil, lift the angle of the workpiece and strike down on the centre of the bend. Turn 90 degrees and repeat this process to eliminate bends in the other axes. Once we have a straight square taper of the right length, we're going to octagonalise it. We lay the taper on the anvil and turn 45 degrees so that the corners are in contact. Then we knock the corners off, striking more gently at the tip than at the thicker portion of the taper. Once the bar is octagonal in section, you may rotate the bar under the hammer to knock off any remaining corners. You can then keep working into the lower heats, which will move the metal less and less and smooth the surface off in a process known as planishing. We then let this air cool, and using a file we can even up any imperfections in the rounding process to make our round punch round. We can then cut off the bottom of the taper to choose the size of hole that you want the punch to make. I wanted quite a small punch of about 4mm. Then I cut the top off because where I initially cut it off the spring wasn't perpendicular. Then, using a file, we chamfer the edges of the struck end to reduce mushrooming in use. This leaves us with this. Next, onto the heat treat. First we slowly heat it in the fire until it's non-magnetic and keep it there for a while, around 10 minutes, and then let it air cool. This reduces the stress in the steel. Next we preheat the oil. This reduces viscosity, allowing it to, ironically, wick heat quicker from the steel. Once again, heat the steel to non-magnetic and quench it, moving it around to avoid insulating air bubbles. When it's cooled to black in the oil, cool it in water so it can be handled again. We knock the scale off using a file so that we can see the temper colours. Then, by passing it back and forth through the flames, checking for the colour of the thin oxide layer, we see how much it's tempered. We're aiming for a purple colour on the end. The lighting in my workshop is dreadful and it didn't show up very well on camera, but I promise you, it's there. Now, with our finished punch, it's time for a quick test. Make sure to cool it regularly, I used grease, to preserve the temper. Hot steel will ruin the temper eventually, but we can keep it nice for now. We punch most of the way through, then flip it over and punch through the cold spot on the other side, and out pops the slug. Now we can add a round punch to our collection of tools for upcoming projects. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider a like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. If you'd like to give extra support to the channel, please consider becoming a Patreon, link below, like these lovely people scrolling past. Have a great day.